The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Windsor Castle, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Kate Middleton stood in the doorway of what had once been Queen Elizabeth's private sitting room, her fingers wrapped around a cup of tea that had long since gone cold. The room still held traces of the late Queen's presence, the floral cushions she had personally chosen, the small crystal figurines that caught the light just so, and the faint scent of her favorite lavender perfume that seemed to linger in. The very walls, William emerged from behind the mahogany desk where he had been sorting through personal letters and official documents. His usually composed demeanor showed cracks of exhaustion and grief that he couldn't quite hide, even from his wife. The weight of inheriting not just a title, but the emotional legacy of his beloved grandmother pressed heavily on his shoulders. The children asked about her again this morning, Kate said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. George wanted to know if great-granny was watching him from heaven during his rugby match tomorrow. She paused, swallowing hard. I didn't know what to tell him. William set down a leather-bound photo album and walked over to his wife. Without words, he wrapped his arms around her, and they stood there in the silence of the room that had witnessed decades of royal history. Kate could feel the tension in his body, the way he held himself just a little too rigidly, as if letting go completely might cause him to fall apart entirely. The past few months had been a whirlwind. Public appearances, state functions, and private moments of grief that they had to navigate while the world watched. Every gesture was analyzed, every expression photographed, every moment of sadness or joy dissected by millions of strangers who felt they knew them intimately. She would have loved seeing Charlotte's school play last week, William murmured into Kate's hair. Do you remember how she used to light up whenever the children performed anything for her? Even George's terrible knock-knock jokes made her laugh until her eyes watered. Kate smiled despite the tears that threatened to fall. The Queen had indeed been a devoted great-grandmother, someone who had embraced Kate into the family with a warmth that contradicted her public image of formality and duty. During their engagement, when Kate had been terrified of making a mistake that might embarrass William or the crown, it had been the Queen who had taken her aside and shared stories of her own early days as a royal bride. I keep thinking about that afternoon in Balmoral last summer, Kate said, her voice thick with emotion. When she taught Louis how to feed the corgis properly, he was so proud that he had learned something special from great-granny. She was so patient with him, even when he spilled half the food on her shoes. The memory brought both comfort and pain, those precious, ordinary moments, the kind that never made headlines, but meant everything to a family trying to maintain their humanity within the constraints of royal protocol. The Queen had understood this balance better than anyone, having lived it for over 70 years. William pulled back slightly to look at his wife's face. Kate's strength throughout this period had been remarkable, but he could see the toll it was taking on her. She had become not just his anchor, but the emotional center that held their family together while they all processed this monumental loss. The hardest part, William said, his voice cracking slightly, is that I keep wanting to call her. Yesterday, when the Prime Minister mentioned something about the Commonwealth meetings, my first instinct was to ring her and ask what she thought. For 39 years she was always there, always ready with advice or just to listen. Kate reached up and touched his face gently. She's still here, in different ways. In the way you handle difficult decisions, in how you talk to the children about service and duty, in the way you remember to ask about people's families, not just their jobs. Those aren't just royal protocols, William. Those are lessons she taught you by example. They walked together to the window that overlooked the garden where the Queen had spent countless hours. The roses were in full bloom, their vibrant colors a stark contrast to the gray mood that had settled over the royal family. Kate remembered how the Queen had once told her that gardens were like relationships. They required constant attention, patience, and the faith that even during the darkest winters, spring would eventually return. The children are handling it better than I expected, Kate observed, watching a gardener tend to the flower beds below. But sometimes I catch them looking confused, like they're waiting for her to walk into the room and ask about their day. Charlotte still sets out an extra place at tea time sometimes. William nodded, remembering his own childhood confusion when his mother had died. The difference was that his children had been fortunate enough to know their great-grandmother as a loving family member, not just as the distant figure of the Queen. They had memories of her laugh, her gentle corrections when they forgot their manners, her genuine interest in their hobbies and friends. She made sure they knew her as just Gangan, William said, using the nickname his children had given their great-grandmother. That might be the greatest gift she gave them. They got to love her as a person, not just respect her as a monarch. The afternoon light was beginning to fade, casting the room in a golden glow that seemed to make the Queen's presence feel even more tangible. Kate and William stood there together, not speaking, just sharing the weight of their grief and the comfort of their mutual understanding. In the distance, they could hear the sounds of their children playing in another part of the castle. George's voice, calling out instructions for some game, Charlotte's laughter, and Louis's determined attempts to keep up with his older siblings. Life, with all its joys and sorrows, was continuing around them, just as the Queen would have wanted. She would tell us not to dwell, Kate said finally. Though her voice suggested she wasn't quite ready to follow that advice yet, she would say that duty continues, that the children need us to be strong, that the country needs us to move forward. William squeezed her hand. But she would also understand that we need time to say goodbye properly. Even queens need to grieve, and she knew that better than anyone. As evening approached, they finally left the sitting room, but not before William placed a single white rose from the garden on the small table where the Queen used to keep her reading glasses. It was a simple gesture, but it felt like the beginning of learning how to honor her memory while also learning to live without her physical presence guiding them through each day. The following week brought a series of events that would test Kate and William's resolve in ways they hadn't anticipated. The Queen's private secretary had discovered a collection of handwritten letters in her personal desk, each one addressed 2 different members of the family, written in her distinctive handwriting, and sealed with her personal wax stamp. The letters had been written months before her passing, during what her doctor had described as a period of particular clarity and peace. Kate held the envelope with her name written in the Queen's careful script, her hands trembling slightly. William had received his letter that morning. The emotion in his eyes when he emerged from his study had told her everything she needed to know about its contents. Now, sitting in their private quarters at Kensington Palace, with the children safely at school, she finally found the courage to break the seal. The letter began with the Queen's characteristic warmth mixed with formal courtesy. But as Kate read on, the words became more personal and intimate than anything she had expected. The Queen wrote about how proud she was of the woman Kate had become, not just as a member of the royal family, but as a mother, a wife, and a person who had brought genuine joy and stability to William's life. "My dear Catherine," the letter read, "I have watched you grow from a nervous young woman who worried about curtsying correctly to a confident mother, who can handle state dinners and scraped knees with equal grace. You have given William something I could never provide, the experience of being truly chosen and loved for who he is, not what he represents." Kate had to pause in her reading, overwhelmed by the Queen's words. The early years of her relationship with William had been marked by constant scrutiny in comparison to Diana, with media outlets questioning whether she was suitable for royal life. The Queen's acknowledgement of her journey and growth felt like a validation she hadn't realized. She needed the letter continued with specific memories that surprised Kate with their detail. The Queen wrote about watching Kate comfort a crying child during a public engagement, about the way she had instinctively reached out to steady an elderly veteran who had stumbled during a ceremony, about the laughter she had brought to family gatherings that had sometimes felt too formal and restrained. "You have reminded us all that royalty is not about perfection," the Queen had written, "but about genuine care for others. When you hold someone's hand during a difficult moment, or when you remember to ask about someone's grandchildren, you are embodying the very best of what this family can be." William found Kate in tears when he returned from his meeting with the Archbishop of Canterbury about upcoming memorial services. Without asking, he sat beside her and waited while she composed herself enough to speak. She wrote about the day. "I was so nervous before my first solo engagement," Kate said, her voice shaky. "I thought I had hidden it well, but she knew." She wrote that she had arranged for her lady in waiting to be there, not to watch me, but to help if I needed it. Never knew she had done that. William took her hand, remembering his own letter and the similar revelations it had contained. The Queen had written to him about the weight of expectations, about the difficulty of balancing personal happiness with public duty, and about her hopes for his future reign. But she had also written about simpler things, how proud she was of his parenting, how she had seen him grow from a boy struggling with his mother's death to a man who had found peace and purpose. She was protecting all of us in ways we never realized, William said quietly. In my letter mentioned things she had done behind the scenes, conversations she had with government officials, decisions she had made to shield us from unnecessary pressure. She was still taking care of us even when we thought we were handling everything ourselves. The weight of these revelations added a new dimension to their grief. It wasn't just that they missed her presence, but that they were beginning to understand the full extent of what they had lost. The Queen had been not just a figurehead, but an active guardian of their family's well-being. Someone who had used her decades of experience to smooth their path and ways they were only now beginning to appreciate. Kate folded the letter carefully and placed it in the wooden box where she kept her most precious keepsakes. The children's letters, she said suddenly. Did she write to them too? William nodded. Age-appropriate versions, sealed and marked to be given to them when they turn 18. She thought of everything, Kate. Even years into the future, she's still going to be there for them? This realization brought both comfort and a fresh wave of sadness. George, Charlotte, and Louis would grow up with their great-grandmother's wisdom and love, reaching them at crucial moments in their lives. But they would also have to face those moments without her physical presence to guide them. That evening, as they tucked the children into bed, Kate found herself studying their faces more carefully than usual. George, at 10, was beginning to understand the permanence of death, but still asked questions that revealed his confusion about why important people had to die. Charlotte, 8, had become more clingy and needed extra reassurance at bedtime. Louis, at 5, seemed to accept the situation with the resilience of childhood, but occasionally asked when they would visit Great-Granny again. Will you tell us more stories about Gangan? Charlotte asked as Kate smoothed her blanket. Happy stories, not sad ones. Kate smiled, remembering the Queen's letter and her emphasis on finding joy even in difficult times. Of course, darling. What would you like to hear about? The time she taught me to wave properly, Charlotte said, demonstrating the controlled motion she had practiced. And how she said I was a natural at it. As Kate recounted the story, she could almost hear the Queen's voice joining in, adding details and gentle corrections the way she had done during countless family gatherings. The memory was bittersweet, but also healing. Reminder that love doesn't disappear with death, but transforms into something that can be shared and celebrated. Later, after the children were asleep, Kate and William sat in their living room, surrounded by photo albums and mementos they had been sorting through. The Queen's letter had given them both a new perspective on their grief, helping them understand that mourning wasn't just about loss, but also about recognizing the profound impact someone had on their lives. She knew this day would come, William said, looking at a photo of the Queen with baby Louis. She prepared for it in ways we're still discovering. But I don't think anything could have prepared us for how much we would miss her voice, her laugh, her presence in our daily lives. Kate nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. The Queen had been the steady constant in their lives, the person who had witnessed their love story from its beginning, and had helped them navigate the unique challenges of royal life. Her absence felt like losing not just a beloved family member, but a wise counselor whose advice had shaped their decisions and their understanding of their roles. Tomorrow, we have that engagement at the Children's Hospital, Kate said, thinking about their first major public appearance since receiving the letters. She would want us to focus on the families we're meeting, not on our own sadness. William agreed, but they both knew that carrying on with their duties while processing such profound grief would be one of the most challenging aspects of their new reality. The Queen had made it look effortless, but they were learning that royal composure was something that had to be consciously maintained, especially during times of personal struggle. The Children's Hospital visit proved to be more emotionally challenging than either Kate or William had anticipated. As they walked through the bright corridors, greeting young patients and their families, Kate found herself thinking about the Queen's natural ability to bring comfort to people during their most difficult moments. The Queen had visited countless hospitals over the decades. She had possessed an almost magical quality that could make a sick child smile or give hope to worried parents. Standing beside a 7-year-old girl named Emma, who was recovering from heart surgery, Kate felt the weight of trying to fill that role. Emma's mother had tears in her eyes as she explained how her daughter had been looking forward to meeting the prince and princess, how it had given her something positive to focus on during the long days of treatment. "My great-granny used to visit hospitals too," Kate found herself saying to Emma, speaking more personally than she usually would during official engagements. "She taught me that the most important thing is just to listen and to let people know they're not alone." Emma's eyes widened with curiosity. "Was she the Queen?" "My mummy showed me pictures of her with the pretty dresses and the crown." "Yes, she was," Kate replied, kneeling down to Emma's level. "And she would have loved meeting you. She always said that brave children like you made her proud to be British." William watched this exchange from across the room, where he was speaking with a teenage boy who had been in a car accident. The boy's father had served in the military and was telling William about how the Queen's support for veterans had meant everything to his family. These conversations, William realized, were happening all over the country, people sharing their personal connections to the Queen, their memories of her impact on their lives. As they moved through the hospital, Kate noticed how naturally the conversations turned to the Queen's legacy. Parents spoke about her dedication to children's charities. Nurses mentioned her visits to healthcare workers during the pandemic. And even young patients seemed to understand that someone very special had died and that Kate and William were sad about it. "She's watching over all of us now," one grandmother told Kate while her grandson received treatment. "Including you, dear. I can see how much you miss her." The simple kindness of these words, spoken by someone who was dealing with her own family's crisis, reminded Kate of something the Queen had often said about public service, that it was a privilege to be allowed into people's lives during their most vulnerable moments, and that the royal family received far more than they gave during these encounters. During the drive back to Kensington Palace, Kate and William reflected on the day's experiences. The visit had been emotionally draining, but it had also provided them with a sense of purpose and connection that they hadn't felt since the Queen's death. "Did you notice how many people wanted to talk about her?" William asked. "Not just to offer condolences, but to share their own memories and connections. It's like she's still bringing people together, even now." Kate nodded, thinking about the various conversations they had had throughout the day. "That little girl, Emma, asked me if the Queen was happy in heaven. I told her that I thought she was, especially knowing that people like Emma's family were being taken care of by the doctors and nurses." "What did she say to that?" "She said that maybe the Queen was helping the doctors from heaven, like a guardian angel. And then she asked if we were guardian angels too, since we were visiting her." William smiled at this innocent wisdom. Children, he had learned, often understood complex emotional truths more clearly than adults. Emma's question had inadvertently touched on something that he and Kate had been struggling with: how to honor the Queen's memory while also finding their own way forward in their roles. That evening, as they helped the children with their homework and prepared for dinner, Kate found herself thinking about the generational nature of their grief. George, Charlotte, and Louis were experiencing their first major loss, learning lessons about death and memory that would shape their understanding of life. Meanwhile, Kate and William were dealing with the loss of a grandmother figure, but also the loss of a mentor and guide who had helped them navigate the complexities of royal life. "Daddy, why do people keep bringing flowers to the palace?" Charlotte asked over dinner, referring to the continuing stream of floral tributes that were being left at various royal residences. "Because they loved great-granny too," William explained, gently. "Even though they didn't know her personally, she was part of their lives. She was on their money, in their newspapers, and she represented something stable and familiar to them, like how she was always there for us." George asked, showing a maturity beyond his years. "Exactly like that," Kate said. "She was a constant presence in all our lives, and people are showing that they miss her too." Louis, who had been quietly eating his vegetables, suddenly looked up with a serious expression. Will people bring flowers when we die too? The question caught both parents off guard, but Kate recovered quickly. Hopefully not for a very long time, she said with a gentle smile. But if we live good lives and help people like Great-Granny did, then yes, people will remember us fondly. I want to help people, Louis declared with the certainty that only a 5-year-old could possess. Ellie Great-Granny did. After dinner, as they settled into their evening routine, Kate and William found themselves discussing the deeper implications of their children's questions and observations. The Queen's death had not only affected their family personally, but it had also marked the beginning of a new chapter in their children's understanding of their future roles and responsibilities. They're starting to understand what it means to be royal, Kate observed as they watched George help Charlotte with a difficult word in her reading book. Not just the privileges, but the expectations and the weight of public service. William nodded, remembering his own childhood realization that his life would be different from his friends' lives. She prepared them for this better than we realized. All those conversations about duty and service, all those times she insisted they learn proper protocols, she was giving them tools they would need. But she also made sure they knew they were loved for who they are, not just for what they represent. Kate added, "That's the balance we need to maintain now." As they prepared for bed, Kate found herself returning to the Queen's letter, particularly the parts about finding joy in service and maintaining hope even during difficult times. The hospital visit had shown her that their grief, while deeply personal, was also shared by millions of people who were looking to them for guidance on how to move forward. "She's still teaching us," Kate said to William as they turned off the lights. "Even now, every challenge we face seems to come with some memory of her wisdom or example." William took her hand in the darkness. "Tomorrow, we have the meeting with the Commonwealth representatives. She would want us to focus on the relationships she spent decades building, not on how much we miss her guidance." "We'll figure it out," Kate replied with more confidence than she felt. "We have each other, we have the children, and we have all the lessons she taught us. That has to be enough." But even as she said these words, Kate knew that learning to live without the Queen's presence would be a long process, one that would require them to draw on reserves of strength they weren't sure they possessed. The Queen had made everything look effortless, but Kate was beginning to understand that grace under pressure was something that had to be practiced and refined over time. In the quiet of their bedroom, with the sounds of London settling into night around them, Kate and William began the slow process of accepting that their new reality would require them to find their own way forward while honoring the foundation the Queen had built for them. The Commonwealth meeting proved to be a turning point in Kate and William's journey through grief. Representatives from 56 nations had gathered to discuss the future of the organization that had been so close to the Queen's heart. As William took his seat at the head of the polished conference table, Kate could see the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders in a way that was both inspiring and heartbreaking. The Queen had spent over 70 years nurturing relationships with Commonwealth leaders, remembering their families, their struggles, and their achievements. She had been not just a ceremonial head, but a genuine friend and advocate for nations that spanned every continent. Now William was expected to step into that role with the same warmth and wisdom, despite his own grief and the enormous shoes he was trying to fill. "Your Majesty," the High Commissioner from Jamaica began, using the formal address that still made William pause slightly. "We want you to know that our thoughts are with you and your family during this difficult time. The Queen was not just our head of state, but a dear friend to our people." Similar sentiments were expressed by representative after representative, sharing specific memories of the Queen's visits, her personal messages during times of crisis, and her unwavering support for their nation's development and independence. Kate watched William's face as he listened to these tributes, seeing how each story added both comfort and pressure to his grieving heart. The delegate from Canada spoke about the Queen's final video message to their parliament, recorded just weeks before her death, in which she had expressed her hopes for the future of the Commonwealth family. The representative from New Zealand shared how the Queen had personally called their Prime Minister during the Christchurch shooting, not as a formal duty, but as someone who genuinely cared about their nation's pain. "She made us feel seen. The representative from a small Pacific Island nation said simply, "In a world where powerful countries often ignore smaller ones, she remembered our names, our challenges, and our dreams. That is her greatest legacy." As the meeting progressed, Kate found herself thinking about the enormity of the relationships William was inheriting. These weren't just diplomatic connections, but personal bonds that the Queen had carefully cultivated over decades. Each representative in the room had stories of her kindness, her attention to detail, and her genuine interest in their country's well-being. During a break in the proceedings, Kate stepped outside to get some air and found herself in the garden, where she and William had often walked with the Queen. The roses were still blooming, their vibrant colors a reminder of the beauty that persists even in times of sorrow. She was surprised to find the High Commissioner from Australia there, apparently needing the same moment of reflection. "I hope you don't mind the company," the Commissioner said gently. "I just needed a moment to collect myself. These meetings always make me think of her." Kate smiled, grateful for the honest emotion from someone who understood the complexity of their situation. "Please, I'm glad for the company. It's overwhelming, isn't it? Understanding how much she meant to so many people. She had a gift for making everyone feel like they were her priority," the Commissioner replied. When she visited Australia last time, she spent an hour talking to a group of school children about their science project. She asked detailed questions and remembered to follow up with them later. That's the kind of person she was. "William is trying so hard to live up to that example," Kate confided, feeling safe to be honest with someone who had known the Queen professionally. "But it's difficult when you're still processing your own grief. The Queen told me once that leadership isn't about having all the answers," the Commissioner said thoughtfully. "It's about caring enough to keep asking the right questions. Your husband clearly has that quality." When they returned to the meeting, Kate noticed a subtle change in William's demeanor. He seemed more relaxed, more willing to ask questions, rather than feeling he needed to have immediate solutions. When the representative from South Africa raised concerns about youth unemployment, William didn't offer platitudes, but instead asked detailed questions about what had been tried and what additional support might be helpful. "My grandmother always said that the Commonwealth's strength came from sharing our challenges as well as our successes," William said at one point. "I hope we can continue that tradition of honest conversation and mutual support." Kate could see that the other representatives were responding to William's authentic approach. They began sharing more specific concerns and ideas, turning the meeting from a formal diplomatic gathering into something closer to a family discussion. This, Kate realized, was exactly what the Queen would have wanted. Not a performance of leadership, but genuine engagement with the people and issues that mattered. The meeting concluded with concrete plans for several initiatives, including a youth exchange program and a climate change collaboration that would have made the Queen proud. As the representatives filed out, many of them stopped to speak personally with William and Kate, sharing memories of the Queen and expressing their confidence in the future of the Commonwealth under William's leadership. "She would have loved seeing you lead that discussion," Kate told William as they walked home together. "You found your own way to connect with them, not by trying to be exactly like her, but by being yourself while honoring her values." William was quiet for a moment, processing the day's events. "I kept hearing her voice during the meeting," he said finally. "Not giving me specific words, but reminding me to listen first, to care genuinely, and to remember that behind every policy discussion are real people with real needs." That evening, as they shared dinner with the children, Kate noticed that William seemed more present than he had been in weeks. The weight of responsibility was still there, but it had transformed from a crushing burden into something more manageable, a challenging but meaningful inheritance from someone who had loved him deeply. "How was your big meeting, Daddy?" Charlotte asked, looking up from her spaghetti with the serious expression she wore when discussing grown-up topics. "It was good, darling. I met with people from all over the world who loved Great Granny and want to continue the work she started." "Did you tell them about how she taught us to wave?" Louis asked, with the typical 5-year-old ability to reduce complex situations to their most human elements. William laughed. The first genuine laugh Kate had heard from him in days. "I didn't, but maybe I should have. She did teach you the perfect." Royal wave. As they helped the children with their baths and bedtime stories, Kate reflected on how the day had marked a subtle but important shift in their grieving process. They were beginning to understand that honoring the Queen's memory wasn't about perfectly replicating her approach, but about applying her values and wisdom to their own unique circumstances and personalities. "The children are helping us heal," Kate observed as they tucked Louis into bed. "Their questions and innocent observations keep bringing us back to what's really important." William nodded, watching their youngest son settle into sleep with the complete trust that only children possess. She would say that's exactly as it should be, that family comes first, even when duty calls. Later, as they prepared for bed themselves, Kate found herself feeling cautiously optimistic about the future for the first time since the Queen's death. The day had shown them that while their grief would continue, it didn't have to paralyze them. They could honor the Queen's legacy while also growing into their own roles and responsibilities. "Tomorrow, we have the school visit," William said, referring to their planned appearance at a primary school where they would be reading to children and discussing the importance of education. "She would love that," Kate replied, thinking about the Queen's passion for education and her belief that children were the key to the future, simple, genuine, focused on what matters most. As they settled into sleep, both Kate and William felt a sense of peace that had been elusive since the Queen's passing. They were beginning to understand that their grief, while painful, was also a testament to the depth of their love for her and their commitment to continuing her work in their own way. The school visit revealed an unexpected dimension of their grief journey when Kate found herself face to face with a classroom of 6-year-olds who had prepared a special tribute to the Queen. The children at St. Mary's primary school had been working on a project about people who help others, and their teacher had guided them to focus on the Queen's lifetime of service as their main example. Walking into the bright, crane-decorated classroom, Kate was immediately struck by the walls covered with children's drawings of the Queen. Some showing her in her crown and formal robes, others depicting her with her beloved corgis, and several showing her simply as a smiling grandmother figure. The innocence and love in these amateur portraits was more moving than any professional tribute Kate had seen. "We made these for you," announced a little girl named Sophie, bouncing with excitement as she held up a handmade card. "Because we know you must be very sad that the Queen Lady died." William knelt down to Sophie's level, his voice gentle as he accepted the card. "That's very kind of you, Sophie. What did you draw here?" "That's the Queen in heaven with lots of dogs," Sophie explained matter-of-factly. "My Nan says all good people go to heaven, and they get to play with all the dogs that died too. So the Queen must be very happy now." Kate had to turn away for a moment to compose herself, overwhelmed by the simple faith and logic of a child's understanding of death and afterlife. When she turned back, she found several other children gathered around them, each eager to share their own artwork and thoughts about the Queen. "My mummy cried when the Queen died," said a boy named Marcus. "She said it was like losing her own." "Granny, did you cry too?" "Yes, we did," Kate replied honestly, something she rarely did during public appearances. "The Queen was very special to us, just like your granny is special to you." "But you're not crying now," observed a girl named Amelia with the sharp perception that children possess. "Are you feeling better?" William and Kate exchanged a look, realizing that these children were asking the very questions they had been struggling to answer for themselves. How do you explain the process of grief to a child when you're still learning to navigate it yourself? "Sometimes we feel sad, and sometimes we feel happy when we remember good things about her," Kate explained. "Both feelings are okay. The important thing is that we keep loving her and remembering all the wonderful things she taught us." The teacher, Mrs. Henderson, had prepared a reading activity where the children would take turns reading stories about helping others, with Kate and William providing encouragement and assistance. As they settled into the reading corner, surrounded by small chairs and colorful cushions, Kate found herself thinking about how the Queen had always been completely at ease with children, never talking down to them, but also never forgetting to speak at their level. "Would you like to hear about the time the Queen helped me when I was nervous?" Kate found herself asking the group, departing from the planned activity, but following an instinct that felt right. The children's eyes widened with interest, and They gathered closer as Kate began to tell them about her first solo royal engagement. When she had been so worried about making mistakes that she could barely sleep the night before. The Queen knew I was scared, Kate continued, so she arranged for someone very nice to be there with me, just in case I needed help. She didn't tell me about it beforehand because she didn't want me to worry more, but she was taking care of me even when I didn't know it. Like when my mom puts a nightlight in my room when I'm scared of the dark? Asked a boy named James. Exactly. Like that, Kate smiled. She was always thinking about how to help people feel better and safer. William picked up the story, sharing how the Queen had taught him to remember people's names and ask about their families because it made them feel important and valued. The children listened with rapt attention, occasionally asking questions that revealed their developing understanding of kindness and service. So being a queen wasn't just about wearing pretty dresses and living in a castle? Asked Emma, a girl who had clearly been thinking deeply about what royalty meant.
Ow!
William replied. Being a queen meant spending your whole life trying to help other people and make the world a better place. The pretty dresses and the castle were just part of the job, but the real work was caring about people. As the morning progressed, Kate found herself increasingly moved by the children's natural wisdom and their ability to process complex emotions with remarkable clarity. When they moved on to the planned reading activity, she noticed how the stories about helping others seemed to resonate differently now, filtered through their recent conversations about the Queen's life of service. During snack time, while the children munched on apple slices and crackers, a quiet girl named Lily approached Kate with a serious expression. My gran says that when people die, they leave behind all the good things they did, Lily said thoughtfully. So the Queen left behind all her helping, and now other people have to do it instead. Is that why you're here talking to us? Kate felt tears prick her eyes at the profound simplicity of this observation. That's exactly right, Lily. We're trying to continue the helping she started. And when you're old like she was, will other people have to continue your helping too? Lily continued with the relentless logic of childhood. Yes, Kate replied, glancing over at William, who was helping a group of boys with a puzzle. How it works. Everyone gets to help for a while, and then they pass it on to the next people, like a relay race, suggested Marcus, who had been listening to their conversation. Very much like a relay race, Kate agreed, struck by how perfectly this analogy captured the concept of generational responsibility that she and William had been struggling to articulate. When it came time for the children to present their group project about the Queen, Kate and William were amazed by the depth of research the 6-year-olds had accomplished with their teacher's guidance. They had learned about the Queen's role during World War II, her love of horses and dogs, her travels around the world, and her support for various charities. She lived for 96 years, announced Sophie, reading from a carefully prepared poster that's like ... really, really old. She met lots and lots of people and helped them all. She had 4 children, just like my auntie, added James. But her children grew up to be princes and princesses, which is different from my cousins. And she had great-grandchildren who are probably sad like you are, said Amelia, with the empathy that children often display more naturally than adults. As the presentation continued, Kate realized that these children understood the Queen's legacy in ways that many adults struggled to grasp. They saw her not as a distant figure of state, but as a person who had chosen to spend her long life helping others. And they understood instinctively that this was something worth celebrating and continuing. The visit concluded with the children singing a song they had learned about helping others, their young voices filling the classroom with hope and joy. As Kate and William prepared to leave, the children insisted on giving them all the drawings and cards they had made, pressing them into their hands with the generous urgency that only children possess. Will you show these to your children? Asked Emma, referring to George, Charlotte, and Louis. Maybe they could come visit us sometime and tell us more stories about the Queen. I think they would love that, William replied, genuinely touched by the invitation. They miss her too, and talking about her helps all of us feel better. Walking back to their car, Kate and William carried bags full of children's artwork and hearts full of unexpected comfort. The visit had shown them that grief could be shared in ways that brought healing rather than additional pain. and that the Queen's legacy was already being understood and embraced by the next generation. Those children taught us something important. Today, Kate said as they drove through the London streets, they showed us that continuing her work isn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about caring genuinely and helping where we can. William nodded, thinking about little Lily's observation about people leaving behind their good deeds. She's still teaching us, even now, through the children's questions, through the Commonwealth representatives yesterday, through every interaction. We have where we try to apply what she taught us. That evening, as they shared the day's experiences with their own children, Kate and William found themselves laughing for the first time in weeks. George, Charlotte, and Louis were delighted by the drawings and cards from the school children, and they spent the evening creating their own artwork in response. "Can we visit those children sometime?" Charlotte asked, echoing Emma's earlier invitation. "I'd like to tell them about how Great Granny taught me to curtsy properly. And I could show them my football skills," added George. Great Granny always said I was getting better at keeping the ball in bounds. "I want to tell them about the corgis," Louis announced. "Great Granny let me help feed them once, and they licked my hands." As they helped the children prepare for bed, Kate reflected on how the day had marked another important step in their healing process. They were learning that their grief didn't have to be a private burden, but could be shared in ways that brought comfort to others and connected them more deeply to the Queen's legacy of service. "She would have loved today," Kate said to William, as they turned off the children's lights. The way those children understood her message about helping others. The way they made us feel better by sharing their own understanding of loss and love, and the way our own children are processing it all, William added. Thinking about their dinner conversation and the natural way their children had wanted to reach out to the school children, they're learning that sadness and joy can coexist. That missing someone doesn't mean you can't also feel happy about good memories. As they settled into their own bedtime routine, Kate and William both felt a sense of progress that had been missing since the Queen's death. They were beginning to understand that healing from grief wasn't about forgetting or moving on, but about learning to carry their love for the Queen forward in ways that honored her memory, while also allowing them to engage fully with their present responsibilities and relationships. 6 months after the Queen's death, Kate and William found themselves standing in the same garden where they had first processed their grief together. The seasons had changed, and the roses that had been in full bloom during those early days of mourning had given way to the subtle beauty of late autumn flowers. The garden looked different now, but it still held the same sense of peace and continuity that had drawn them there during their darkest moments. The occasion was bittersweet. They were here to plant a new rosebush in the Queen's memory, a ceremony that would mark both an ending and a beginning. The children had helped choose the variety, selecting a white rose called Queen Elizabeth that would bloom every year as a living reminder of their great-grandmother's enduring presence in their lives. "Are you ready for this?" William asked Kate, as they watched George, Charlotte, and Louis take turns with the small gardening tools, their faces serious with the importance of their task. Kate nodded, though she felt the familiar tightness in her chest that still accompanied moments of acute remembrance. "I think so. It feels right, doesn't it? Something growing and beautiful, something that will be here long after we're gone." The past 6 months had been a journey of discovery for their entire family. They had learned that grief wasn't a problem to be solved, but a love to be carried forward. Each challenge they had faced, from major state occasions to quiet family moments, had taught them something new about how to honor the Queen's memory while also growing into their own roles and responsibilities. George, now 11, had shown a maturity that sometimes took Kate's breath away. He had begun asking thoughtful questions about his future responsibilities, clearly influenced by his great-grandmother's example, but also determined to find his own path. Just the week before, he had told his parents that he wanted to focus on environmental issues when he grew up, because the Queen had taught him that protecting the world for future generations was one of the most important duties of leadership. "She would be so proud of how thoughtful you've become," Kate told him as he carefully placed soil around the rosebush's roots. "You're already thinking about how to help others, just like she did." Charlotte, now 9, had channeled her grief into an almost fierce determination to remember and share everything the Queen had taught her. She had started a scrapbook filled with photos, stories, and memories of their great-grandmother. And she often asked Kate and William to help her add new pages when she remembered something special. "This rose will be in my scrapbook too, Charlotte," announced as she watered the newly planted bush. "I'll take a picture of it every season so I can see how it grows." Louis, at 6, had perhaps processed the loss most naturally of all the children. He still occasionally asked when they would see Great-Granny again. But he had accepted the explanations about death and memory with the resilience of childhood. His favorite way of remembering the Queen was through the stories he told his friends. About her corgis and her love of horses. "Great-Granny would like that we're making something beautiful for her," Louis said simply, his small hands patting the soil around the rosebush with gentle determination as they worked together in the garden. Kate reflected on how much they had all changed since those first devastating days of grief. The sharp edges of their loss had softened into something more manageable, though no less meaningful. They had learned to carry their sadness alongside their joy, to find comfort in continuing the Queen's work while also creating their own family, traditions, and memories. The most surprising development had been how their public roles had evolved. Rather than trying to replicate the Queen's approach exactly, they had found ways to honor her values while also bringing their own personalities and priorities to their work. Kate had become more confident in speaking about mental health and early childhood development, areas where she felt she could make a unique contribution. William had embraced his role as a future king with a new sense of purpose, focusing on environmental conservation and youth leadership. "Remember how terrified we were about continuing her work?" Kate asked William as they watched their children add decorative stones around the base of the rose bush. "We thought we had to be exactly like her to be worthy of her legacy. We understand that the best way to honor her is to be ourselves while applying the values she taught us," William replied. "She never wanted us to be copies of her. She wanted us to find our own way to serve." The Commonwealth relationships that had seemed so daunting 6 months ago had become one of the most rewarding aspects of their evolving roles. By approaching these connections with genuine curiosity and humility, rather than trying to immediately fill the Queen's shoes, they had begun to build their own meaningful relationships with leaders around the world. "The High Commissioner from Jamaica called yesterday," William mentioned as they tidied up the gardening tools. "She wanted to let us know that the youth exchange program we discussed is already showing results. Apparently some of the young people involved have started their own community projects." Kate smiled, remembering how overwhelming that first Commonwealth meeting had felt. She would love knowing that her work is continuing in new ways, that young people are finding their own ways to serve their communities. As the afternoon sun began to set, casting golden light through the garden, the family stood together, admiring their work. The small rose bush looked almost fragile in its new home, but Kate knew that with time and care, it would grow into something strong and beautiful, producing blooms year after year. "Should we say something?" Charlotte asked, her voice taking on the formal tone she used when she sensed the importance of a moment. William looked at his family. Thinking about how the Queen would have handled this moment, she would have kept it simple, focused on gratitude and love, rather than elaborate ceremony. "I think we should just tell her we love her and miss her," he said quietly, "and that we're trying our best to continue what she started." Each family member took a turn sharing a quiet thought or memory with the rosebush, their words mixing with the gentle evening breeze. Kate found herself thinking about the Queen's final letter to her, about the encouragement to find joy in service and to remember that love continues, even after death. As they walked back toward the house, Kate noticed that the children seemed lighter, as if the act of creating something beautiful in the eye. Queen's memory had provided a sense of completion to their grieving process. They chattered about school and upcoming plans, their voices carrying the easy happiness that had been missing from their family conversations for months. "I think we're going to be okay," Kate said to William, as they paused at the garden gate to look back at the newly planted rose bush. "Ain't not the same as before, but okay in a new way." William took her hand, feeling the truth of her words settle into his heart. She gave us everything we needed to continue without her. The values, the example, the love. We just had to learn how to trust ourselves to carry it forward. That evening, as they tucked the children into bed, Kate and William found themselves talking about the future with hope rather than anxiety for the first time since the Queen's death. They had learned that grief and joy could coexist, that missing someone deeply didn't prevent you from embracing new experiences and opportunities. "Will you tell us about the rose bush when it starts blooming?" Louis asked as Kate kissed him goodnight. "Every single bloom," Kate promised. "And maybe by then, you'll have some new stories to add to your collection about Great Granny." As they settled into their own bed, Kate and William reflected on how the day had marked not an ending, but a transformation. Their grief would always be with them, but it had evolved from a crushing weight into a source of strength and purpose. They had learned to say goodbye while also saying hello to their new roles and responsibilities. "She's still with us," William said quietly, thinking about the rose bush that would bloom each spring, about the letters that would reach their children on their 18th birthdays, about the countless ways the Queen's love and wisdom continued to guide their family. Kate nodded, feeling a peace she hadn't experienced since the Queen's death. "Not in the way we wish she could be, but in all the ways that matter most. In our values, our love for each other, and our commitment to serving others." Outside their window, the garden held its secrets and promises. The newly planted rosebush settling into its new home with the quiet confidence of something that knows it will bloom again. The Queen's legacy lived on, not as a burden to be carried, but as a gift to be shared season after season, generation after generation.